Welcome back to the Meatball Mindset, the podcast where we roll with life, lead with heart, and thrive under pressure. I'm Dr. Lisa, and I'm so happy to be back at the table with you. It's been a few weeks since we've been together, and I have to tell you, I've missed sitting around this table with you. You see, I took a little break from the podcast, not because life slowed down. Believe me, the book still had to be written, the keynotes still had to be prepared, the leadership group still had to be facilitated, the family obligations, life was still life. But over the past several weeks, I made a decision. I decided to start living my yes. And if you've been following me on social media, you've probably seen some little glimpses of that journey. I said yes to spending 2 weeks in Massachusetts helping care for my little baby grandson, Jack. I said yes to walking the Brooklyn Bridge. I said yes to a week in Maine with my family. I said yes to a day at Saratoga Racetrack with Rich. I said yes to a quiet mornings in Cape Cod with nothing but the waves and the birds. And none of those moments helped me cross another task off my to-do list, though. But every one of them gave me something to look back on. They made me more creative, more peaceful, more present. And somewhere along the way, I started noticing something. Every one of those yeses began before I packed a suitcase or got in the car or walked onto the beach. They all began with a story about what was possible, about what mattered, a story about whether I believed I deserved to enjoy the life I'm working so hard to build. And you know what? That got me thinking, how many of the decisions we make every day aren't really about the decision at all? How many are driven by the stories we've been telling ourselves for years? Well, that's what today's conversation is all about. The stories we tell ourselves. The ones that hold us back, and the ones that move us forward. Because here's the beautiful thing. If we can change the story, we can change our life. And there's a phrase that has stayed with me for years. Live your yes. I love that phrase. In fact, would you do something with me wherever you are? Say it out loud. Live your yes. Now say it one more time, a little louder. Live your yes. How did that feel? It's amazing what happens when we stop just thinking words and actually say them out loud. I first heard that phrase as the theme of a National Arthritis Foundation conference where I was speaking. In the moment I heard it, I fell in love with it. I didn't know it then, but those 3 little words were planting a seed that would quietly grow for years. And if I'm being honest, I don't think I really understood what live your yes meant. Not until this summer. Over the past few weeks, I stopped just hearing those words and started living them. And the more I said yes, the more I realized something. Every yes begins with a story about what's possible, a story about what's worth making time for, a story about whether we believe we're allowed to enjoy the life we're working so hard to build. So let me ask you, what does your yes look like? Maybe it's saying yes to an opportunity you've been afraid to take. Maybe it's yes to a difficult conversation. Maybe it's yes to slowing down. Or maybe it's simply saying yes to being fully present with the people you love. What would that feel like for you and for them? Sit with that for a minute. You see, every yes looks different, but every yes begins with a story. And here's one of mine. I said yes to spending 2 weeks in Massachusetts with baby Jack. And let me tell you, we had a blast. We made memories that both of us will carry with us forever. We went on walks, we took crazy selfies, we discovered little adventures together, we made up silly dances. I'd turn around, shake my butt and sing twerk, twerk, twerk. Then I'd spin back around, wiggle from side to side and sing wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. I know, I'm sure you can only imagine what that looked like. My kids threatened to send it to Megan Moe, my dance pro, for Dancing with the Stars Capital District. Well, more about that later. But the best part wasn't me making a fool of myself. It was baby Jack. He knew it was coming. His little eyes would light up. Then he'd throw his head back and belly laugh. You know that deep, uncontrollable, from the bottom of your belly baby laugh. The kind that's so contagious you can't help but laugh right along with them. Have you ever had one of those moments where you wish you could just freeze time? I remember looking at Jack and thinking, I want to laugh like this forever. So let me ask you, when was the last time you laughed like that? Not a polite chuckle, not the little laugh you give because someone told you a funny joke. I mean, one of those laughs where your stomach hurts, your eyes fill with tears, and for just a moment, nothing else matters. What in your life makes you belly laugh like that? Maybe it's a grandchild. Maybe it's your children. Maybe it's your spouse, your best friend, or that one person who always knows how to make you laugh until you can't catch your breath. And I hate to admit this, for me, it's the Jerky Boys. I probably just dated myself by referencing the Jerky Boys. But if you know who they are, you're probably laughing already. And if you don't, just trust me on this one. For some reason, I laugh so hard I can barely breathe. And Rich, he knows it too. And every once in a while, he'll put them on in the car, not because he wants to listen to them, but because he wants to listen to me laugh. And before long, I'm laughing so hard that he starts laughing too. Not even at the Jerky Boys anymore, just at me. And honestly, those are some of my favorite moments. And the older I get, the more I realize those moments aren't interruptions to life, they are life. And then there were the songs. Oh my God, I didn't realize how many animal sounds I knew until I started making them up. It all started with the wheels on the bus. Whenever Jack would get a little fussy and was ready to go to sleep, he'd lay his little head on my shoulder and I'd change the words. I'd sing, the birdies, they go tweet, 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 tweet. Then we'd sing about Teeny, my daughter's golden doodle. Teeny, she goes bark, bark, bark. Then we'd sing about Charlie, Jack's kitty. Charlie, she says meow, meow, meow. You get it. Pretty soon, every animal had its own verse. I'm not even sure half of them made any sense. And guess what? It didn't freaking matter. Can I ask you something? Isn't that true about so many things in life? We think it's all about the activity when it's really about the connection. You know what? The point of that song, it wasn't the song, it was the connection. But here's the beautiful part. It didn't stay with just me and Jack. Before long, the whole family was singing that stupid song. And guess what? It became one of those things our family just does now. And it made me think, isn't that how so many of our best family traditions begin? Not because someone planned them, not because they were perfect, but because one person did something small and everyone else joined in. And what started as one silly song to calm a fussy little boy became a memory that all of us will carry long after he forgets where it began. And believe me, once you start singing that song, it never leaves your head. It was kind of like that Baby Shark song, you know, the song you swore you'd never sing. And then 3 hours later, you catch yourself humming it in the grocery store. And I wonder, what silly little tradition is your family creating right now without even realizing it? And funny how the silliest little moments are the ones that become the stories a family tells for years. And my next yes was to a few quiet days in Cape Cod with Rich, Nikki, Christy, and baby Jack. And if you've ever had one of those vacations where you don't really have an agenda, where nobody's looking at their watch, where you're not rushing from one place to the next, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We watched Jack splash in a pool for the very first time. Every little kick sent water flying, and every splash was a new discovery. And then we brought him down to the beach. And we all held our breaths as his tiny little toes touched the ocean for the very first time. He didn't know he was creating a memory, but we did. And those aren't the moments that make the evening news. They're the moments that make a life. And one morning while we were there, I woke up before everyone else. Of course, coffee in my hand. I stepped outside. The air was cool. The waves rolled in one after another. The birds were chirping. There were no notifications, no deadlines, no meetings. No one needed anything from me. Or if they did, I really didn't care. Just the sound of the ocean, the sound of the birds, and space to simply breathe. And let me ask you something. When was the last time you experienced real stillness? Not waiting in line, not sitting in traffic, not scrolling through your phone. I mean true stillness. The kind where you can actually hear your own thoughts again. Because here's what I discovered. Sometimes we think we need more time, and what we really need is more space. Space to notice, space to reflect, space to remember what matters. And maybe that's one of the stories we've been telling ourselves. that being busy or rolling one more meatball means we're being productive, that if we slow down, we're falling behind. But what if the opposite is true? What if some of life's greatest clarity comes not when we're moving faster, but when we're finally still enough to listen? And as I sat there listening to the waves, I realized something. For years, I've encouraged people to roll one more meatball, to keep going, to persevere, to not give up 5 minutes before the miracle. And I still do believe that with all my heart. But over the last 6 weeks, I've been learning something new. Saying yes to a day at the racetrack, saying yes to 2 weeks with baby Jack, saying yes to Maine, saying yes to Cape Cod. And you know what's funny? None of those yeses showed up on a productivity app. I didn't check off another task. I didn't finish another chapter. I didn't answer any more emails. But somehow I came home with more than with what I left with. More peace, more joy, more creativity. And maybe that's what saying yes was trying to teach me all along. And maybe you've experienced that too. You know, you finally step away and somehow you come back with more clarity than you had before. The pressure doesn't disappear. The deadlines are still there. The work still has to get done. For me, it meant getting ready for a book launch, recording this podcast, preparing my next keynote. For you, it might be raising kids, caring for aging parents, running a business, leading a team, or simply making it through another busy week. Whatever it is, life keeps asking things of us. But I've discovered something I didn't expect. Sometimes the most productive thing we could do is protect the gold. And if you've never heard me use that phrase before, don't worry. We're going to spend a lot of time around that topic at this table, talking about what it means to protect the gold. But for today, just think of it this way. The gold is all the good that already exists in your life. The people, the moments, the relationships, the laughter, the peace, the memories you're creating every single day. Because when we never stop rolling one more meatball, it's easy to forget why we started cooking in the first place. And somewhere along the way, we stop protecting the very things that make life rich. Maybe, just maybe, those are the moments that become the stories we'll tell for the rest of our lives. And looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but this summer was becoming a collection of those stories. One yes after another, one memory after another, one reminder after another, that sometimes the richest moments in life aren't the ones we accomplish. They're the ones we experience. So after spending time with baby Jack, we came home, squeezed a lot of work into a few days, and then Rich and I said yes again. This time to one of my favorite places in the world, York Beach, Maine. Now, if you're just getting to know me, you're going to learn pretty quickly that I absolutely love York Beach, Maine. There's something special and magical about that place for me. Maybe it's the rocky coastline or the smell of the ocean, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, or maybe it's the Nubble Lighthouse that just stands quietly in the distance. But every time I'm there, I finally feel like I can exhale. It's one of the few places where I can hear myself think, where my heart gets quiet and my creativity comes alive. Have you ever had a place like that? You know, a place where the noise finally settles and somehow you can hear yourself again. Well, that's Maine for me. And as I sat there looking at the lighthouse, ideas just started flowing for the podcast, for my book. And then one made me laugh out loud. I started thinking about a children's book called Yes, Jack. Why? Because one of Nikki's favorite books when he was little was No, David. Do you remember that book? Every page was no, David, no, David, no. And there I was, all these years later, dreaming about writing a book called Yes, Jack. And it made me wonder, what if we spent a little more time saying yes? Yes to adventure, yes to connection, yes to creating memories, yes to the people we love. And as I looked around that beach, I watched 4 generations of my family enjoying a place that has become part of our story. My grandparents brought my mother brought me, Rich and I brought our children, and now our children are bringing their children. And I realized those yeses didn't just create vacations. They created traditions, they created memories, they created stories that have been passed from one generation to the next. And then another yes came to mind. Can I ask you something? Have you ever looked back on one decision, one simple little yes, and realized it changed the entire direction of your life? For me, that happened 44 years ago when Rich Paterni asked me out. Now, if you're old enough to remember the 80s, asking someone out wasn't just asking somebody to dinner. It was kind of like asking, so, are we going to do this? And I remember saying yes. Did I have any idea where that one little yes would lead? Of course not. But here we are 44 years later and still living that yes. And somewhere between Baby Jack, Cape Cod, Maine, and the Saratoga racetrack, I realized something. Every yes, every no, every decision begins with a story. A story about what's possible, a story about what matters, a story about whether we're enough, a story about whether we belong, a story about whether we deserve joy. And guess what? Most of the time, we don't even realize we're telling ourselves those stories. We just believe them. And then we live them. Whether it's the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell about others, or the stories other people tell about us, everything starts with a story. And if we're sitting at this table together, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because last episode I told you we'd begin talking about the narratives we carry, the stories that quietly shape our lives. And today I want to begin with the most important one, the story you tell yourself. And maybe you've caught yourself saying, I'm not enough. I don't belong in this room. Who am I to lead this department? Who am I to write a book? Who am I to start a business? If I just accomplish one more thing, roll one more meatball, then maybe finally I'll feel like I'm enough. Or maybe your story sounds different. Maybe it's, I'm too old, I'm too young, I've missed my chance, I don't have time. Whatever story you're carrying, here's what I've learned. Those stories don't just shape your thoughts, they quietly begin making your decisions. Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago, I was invited to attend a leadership conference in Brooklyn. I was excited, I was honored, but I'd have to drive to New York City by myself, and getting to Brooklyn came with one small problem, the Brooklyn Bridge. And if you know me, you know bridges and I are not exactly friends. Driving across them, walking across them, looking at them. Okay, looking at them might be a stretch, but actually crossing one? No, thank you. But I said yes anyway. The good news was I made it across. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, wow, I actually did it. I drove across the Brooklyn Bridge. I checked into my hotel, looked out my window, and guess what? There it was, that big, beautiful steel bridge just sitting there, almost like it was calling my name. Come on, Lisa, live your yes. I remember my cousin Leah telling me how incredible it was to walk across it. And immediately the story started. You'll be by yourself. What if something happens? You've never done this before. You don't have to. Have you ever noticed how fear doesn't whisper? It starts writing an entire movie in your head before you've even taken the first step. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe it wasn't a bridge. Maybe it was making a phone call, applying for a job, starting a business, walking into a room where you didn't know anyone. Fear has a way of making us believe its version of the story is the only one. So I stood there for a minute looking out the hotel window. Now, I could have stayed right there. Nobody would have known. I could have ordered room service, answered a few emails, told myself, maybe next time. But that's not why I came to Brooklyn. I looked at that bridge one more time. I smiled. I grabbed my purse and said, nope, today I'm living my yes. And I walked out of my hotel. I headed toward the Brooklyn Bridge. And with every step, the stories got louder. You'll be by yourself. What if something happens? You've never done this before. You don't have to do this. And by the time I reached the entrance of the bridge, I almost turned around. I'm not kidding. My heart was racing. My chest got tight. I started sweating. I knew exactly what was happening. My downstairs brain had taken over. And that's the part of our brain that's wired to protect us. It automatically goes into fight, flight, or freeze whenever it senses danger, even when the danger exists only in the story we're telling ourselves. Here's what fear was whispering to me. What if something happens? What if the bridge collapses? You're here by yourself. This is crazy. I wish Rich were here. Now, did I really think the Brooklyn Bridge was going to collapse? Of course not. But isn't that what our brains do? They start writing stories designed to keep us safe. The problem is, sometimes those stories keep us from living our yes. And standing there looking at that bridge, I realized I had a choice. I could listen to the story fear was telling me, or I could choose a different story. I could turn around, or I could walk right into my fear and live my yes. So I stopped. I took a tactical pause. I breathed. I slowed my nervous system down. Then I asked myself one simple question. What story do I want to believe? Instead of imagining everything that could go wrong, I imagined how I was going to feel when I reached the other side. I imagined the pride, the joy, the accomplishment. Then another story showed up. What if I lived my yes? So I took one deep breath and I started walking, one step at a time, one story at a time, one yes at a time. And something happened almost immediately. People smiled. Strangers offered to take my picture. I took pictures for other people. I bought fresh watermelon from a vendor on the bridge. I laughed. I talked with people from all over the world. Can I ask you something? Have you ever walked into a place expecting to feel completely alone, only to discover people were kinder than the stories in your head? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Even though I started that walk by myself, I never felt alone. And you know what struck me that day? It wasn't really the bridge. It was that I found a seat at the table in a city where I didn't know a single person. One person asked me to take their picture, and another offered to take mine. A fruit vendor smiled at me. Complete strangers started conversations. Isn't that amazing how quickly connection can happen when we stop believing we're alone? Then, just when I thought the experience couldn't get any better, I started walking back across the bridge. And there was this gentleman filming these incredible 360-degree videos. You stood on a little platform while the camera spun all the way around you with the New York skyline behind you. People were lined up, laughing, cheering one another on. They were saying to me, "Come on, you've got to do this." And guess what story immediately popped into my head? Oh, they want me to do it because they want me to put my purse down so they can steal it. This guy wants to airdrop the video to my phone. What if he steals my information? I mean, seriously, isn't it funny how fast our brains can create stories? Maybe you've done the same thing. Maybe not with a purse, but with trust or vulnerability or trying something you've never done before. But I smiled and I thought, no, if I'm going to live my yes, then I am going to live it. So I put my purse down, I stepped onto the platform, the music started playing, Concrete Jungle, Where Dreams Are Made Of, by Alicia Keys, and I started dancing. Now, I'm not talking about Dancing with the Stars quality dancing. I'm talking about dancing like nobody was watching. Only everybody was watching. The camera spun around me and something incredible happened. Complete strangers started cheering and clapping and smiling and celebrating me. People I had never met before were celebrating a moment in my life. And when I stepped off that platform, I couldn't stop smiling. Because just a couple of hours earlier, my heart had been pounding because I was afraid to step onto that bridge. Now, the fear was gone. The anxiety was gone. And in its place was joy, confidence, gratitude. I don't know exactly what chemicals were rushing through my body at that moment, but I know this. I walked onto that bridge filled with fear, and I walked off that bridge filled with possibility. And here's the beautiful part. Nothing about the bridge changed. Nothing about New York changed. The only thing that changed was the story I chose to believe. So let me ask you, what's your bridge? What's the thing you've been talking yourself out of because fear has been writing the story? And what would happen if today you chose a different story? Because maybe, just maybe, your bridge isn't there to stop you. Maybe it's there to remind you that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking the next step, even while your knees are shaking. And maybe that's what living your yes has been all about all along. And a few days after the Brooklyn Bridge, I found myself in a completely different situation. It wasn't a bridge. It wasn't New York City. It was Zumba. Now, if you've been following me on social media, you know that this fall I'm a contestant on Dancing with the Stars Capital Region to raise money for Albany Medical Center Children's Hospital. And let me just say, what was I freaking thinking? My dance pro is Megan, and she's absolutely incredible. She's also one of the strongest people I've ever met. While she's teaching dance classes, she's going through chemo for breast cancer. Just let that sink in for a minute. She teaches a fitness class on Friday morning, goes for chemotherapy, and then comes back and teaches 2 more classes on Saturday. And that's not even her full schedule. She teaches 3 Zumba classes and several other fitness classes during the week, too. She always says movement is medicine. And watching her live those words has taught me more about courage than any speech ever could. And if you know Megan, you know she's funny. She jokes about everything. She'll say, nothing about me is real anymore. My hair's fake, my eyelashes are fake, my eyebrows are fake. We all laugh because, one, I would never know anything on her is fake. I mean, damn, she still looks good, like she belongs on the cover of Vogue magazine. And two, after doing Zumba with her for almost 20 years, I finally realized I'll never look like that. But underneath that humor is one of the bravest women I've ever met. So there we were in Zumba. She was introducing everyone to Dancing with the Stars. And in true Megan fashion, she looked over at me, smiled, and said, "Ugh, I've got my work cut out for me with this one." Everybody laughed. I laughed too. But then something happened. Have you ever been absolutely convinced you knew what someone else was thinking? Well, in that moment, I was. I thought I saw a few people rolling their eyes, and just like that, the story started. Who do you think you are? You don't belong here. These women are dancers. They dance way better than you. You're going to embarrass yourself. Maybe they're wondering why you're the celebrity. Isn't it amazing how fast that happens? 5 minutes earlier, I was dancing. 5 minutes later, I couldn't remember a single step. I wasn't feeling the music anymore. I was watching Megan, watching everyone else, trying so hard to get every move exactly right that I completely forgot why I was there in the first place. I had entered my downstairs brain. Have you ever done that? Maybe not in a Zumba class. Maybe it was walking into a meeting, starting a new job, giving a presentation, walking into a room where you felt like everyone else belonged except for you. Then right in the middle of class, I caught myself. I literally said to myself, "Lisa, stop. This is the story you're telling yourself." Because wait a minute, that's the whole point. Why is there a professional dancer and a celebrity? Because the celebrity isn't supposed to know how to dance. And if Megan didn't have her work cut out for her, there wouldn't be a show. And knowing Megan, if it were easy, she probably wouldn't be doing it anyway. And here's the interesting part. The minute I changed the story, my body changed. I stopped watching everyone else. I stopped trying to be perfect. I started feeling the music again. I started moving again. Now, don't get me wrong, I still have a long way to go. Megan wants me to learn some dance named after an animal. Baby and Jack and I might have mastered the animal sounds, but damn, animal moves are a whole new ball game at 58 years old. But instead of telling myself I can't do it, I'm going to do exactly what I've taught thousands of other people to do. I'm going to visualize it first. So for the next several weeks, I'm going to picture myself doing that move. Not perfectly, but confidently. Because I've learned something else over the years. Our minds don't always know the difference between what we've repeatedly imagined and what we've actually experienced. Can I ask you something? How often are we absolutely certain a story is true when we don't actually know? Were those women actually rolling their eyes? Maybe, maybe not. The truth is, I have no idea. And really, those aren't my ingredients to carry anyway, even if they were. But my brain had already written the story, and my body believed every word of it. My heart started racing. I got in my own head. And once I got in my own head, my body started reacting as though the story were true. And can I ask you something? How many times have you done that? How many times have you written an entire story based on a look, a text message, a tone of voice, or the fact that someone didn't respond the way you expected? And before you knew it, your heart was racing. Your stomach was in knots. Your mood had changed. All because of a story that might not have been true in the first place. And before we know it, we've talked ourselves out of the very thing we've been dreaming about. I almost let a story steal the dance before the music was even over. And maybe that's why this matters so much, because the stories we tell ourselves don't just change the way we think, they change the way we show up. They change the way we move. They change the opportunities we take, and sometimes the ones we never do. And just when I thought I learned everything I needed to learn about the stories we tell ourselves, life gave me another lesson. Go figure. Remember I told you we were in Maine? Well, this happened just a few days after the Brooklyn Bridge. We'd only been there a couple of hours. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were finally settling onto the beach. Now, my kids will tell you I'm that mom. And the minute they get into the water, I'm yelling, "You're too far out, get back." And I don't care if they're 35 years old. I'm still yelling from the beach. Well, All of a sudden, whistles started blowing. The lifeguards were waving everyone out of the water. Guess what happened? They spotted a 15-foot shark just offshore. Now, in all of the years we've been going to Maine, I have never seen anything like that. And if you know anything about Maine water, it's usually too cold for both humans or sharks. Or is it possible that's another story I've been telling myself all of these years? But it was just like a scene out of Jaws. The beach emptied, everyone got out of the water, and immediately my brain started writing a story. That's it, we're done, there's sharks in the water. And so the next day, when someone mentioned going back into the ocean, that story popped right back into my head. And then my son Nicky looked at me and started laughing. He's like, Mom, it was one 15-foot shark. It's not like there was a whole school of 15-foot sharks swimming around out there. Yeah, I looked at him and said, all right, Nick, one 15-foot shark, yeah, no big deal. But then it got me thinking, how many times do we stand on the shore of our lives because there might be sharks in the water? Not real sharks. I mean, you probably already know what your sharks are. The sharks of rejection, failure, judgment, not feeling good enough, the possibility that things might not work out. There's always going to be sharks in the water. The question is, do we spend our lives standing safely on the shore, or do we live our yes and get back in? Well, we chose to get back in. And here's the funny part. I've been going to Maine my entire life, and I don't think I've ever felt the ocean as warm as it was that week. And I almost let one story keep me from experiencing one of my favorite memories of the summer. And as I stood there watching the waves, it hit me. Life is always going to have sharks. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be fear. There will always be reasons to stay safely on the shore. So let me ask you, what are the sharks in your water right now? Maybe your sharks don't have fins. Maybe they sound more like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I'm not enough? What if I disappoint someone? What if I say no and miss the opportunity of a lifetime? I'll be honest, I have sharks in my water right now too. I'm finishing this book. I'm recording this podcast. I'm working on my TED Talk. And some days it feels like there are sharks swimming in every direction. And one of those sharks showed up recently when I was invited to attend a juvenile justice conference in Michigan. The invitation wasn't to speak. It was to attend, to network, to learn, to build relationships. You know, right up my alley. And hopefully to position myself to come back as a speaker in the future. And every part of me wanted to say yes. I love that work. I love serving first responders. I love being in those rooms. But I also knew something had to give. If I said yes to that opportunity, I would be saying no to finishing the work that I believe I'm being called to do right now. And that wasn't an easy decision. Because another story immediately showed up. Well, what if they never think of me again? What if I miss my chance? What if someone else gets the opportunity instead? Sound familiar? Maybe you've been there too. And sometimes the hardest sharks aren't the ones telling us to stay on the shore. Sometimes they're the opportunities that pull us away from the things we're supposed to finish. And that's why this work is never finished. I'm not standing on the other side of the bridge telling you how to do it. I'm still crossing bridges too. I'm right there with you. So let me ask you, what's one story you've been believing lately that might not be true? Because the question isn't whether there are sharks. The question is, what story are you going to believe? And you know what's interesting? Sometimes we don't realize what something means until we have enough distance to look back. At first, the bridge meant fear, until it meant freedom. The shark meant danger, until it meant perspective. Saying no to Michigan felt like a loss, until it became clarity. And then I thought about another story, one I've carried with me for more than 30 years. Standing there on that beach, watching the waves, I realized something. The stories we tell ourselves don't just affect moments like crossing a bridge or dancing in the middle of New York City. Sometimes they shape the biggest decisions of our lives. And that realization brought me back to a story, as I said, I've carried with me for more than 30 years. When my daughter Alyssa was a baby, I was a substitute teacher and trying desperately to get hired as a teacher. Around that same time, my great-grandmother, the woman who helped raise me, who loved me, who shaped so much of who I am, was dying. And one afternoon, I went to visit her during my lunch break, and every part of me wanted to stay. Every part of me wanted to sit beside her, hold her hand, and simply be present. But another story was louder. If you don't go back, they'll never hire you. You have to prove yourself. You can't let them down. So I went back. She probably would have told me to go because that's who she was. And I don't carry guilt because I know how deeply we loved each other. But I do carry a lesson. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves convince us there will always be another meeting, another visit, another opportunity, another chance. And sometimes there isn't. And that moment has stayed with me for so long, not because it defined me, but because it changed me. It taught me to pay attention to the stories making my decisions. Because if we're not careful, the stories we tell ourselves will quietly start living our lives for us. And maybe that's why I wanted to tell you this story. Because I have a feeling I'm not the only one. Maybe your 3 hours look different than mine. Maybe it was one more meeting instead of your son's ball game, one more business trip instead of dinner with your parents, one more email instead of one more conversation, one more project instead of one more memory. Now, I'm not asking you to look back with regret or guilt. I'm asking you to look forward with awareness, because once we recognize the story that's making our decisions, we get to decide whether we still want to believe it. So today, I want to leave you with a few questions. What story has quietly been making your decisions? What yes have you been postponing? What dreams have you convinced yourself aren't possible? What relationship have you been meaning to invest in? What phone call have you been waiting to make? Maybe, just maybe, the story you've been telling yourself isn't the truth. Maybe it's simply a story. And if that's true, then maybe today you get to choose a new one. Maybe today you get to live your yes. And so before we leave the table today, I'd love to hear from you. Which story resonated with you? Did you see yourself crossing the bridge, standing on the dance floor, waiting on the shore, or wishing for just 3 more hours? I'd love to know. Reach out on social media, send me an email, or leave me a comment. Because when you share your story, someone else realizes they're not sitting at this table alone. And if these conversations are helping you, would you help us grow the table? Follow the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, share this episode with someone who might need it. Because you never know when someone else's story might begin to change because you shared yours. And next time, I want to keep this conversation going. We've spent today talking about the stories we tell ourselves. But what happens when the stories we tell ourselves become the stories we believe about someone else? How often do we fill in the blanks without ever knowing the whole story? On the next episode, we'll pull up another chair, share a few more stories, and discover what happens when we become curious instead of certain. Until then, keep rolling with life, leading with heart, and thriving under pressure. And remember, you get to choose the life you create, no matter the ingredients you're handed, because every yes begins with a story. So pay attention to the stories making your decisions. They just might be creating the life you're living. This is the Meatball Mindset, where everyone has a seat at the table. I'm Dr. Lisa, and until next time, keep living your yes. And I'll see you back at the table.